Hello and welcome to the 9 News Business Buzz, where we take up what's happening in business, how it impacts you and our economy. I'm your host, Ryan Frazier, 9 News business expert and CEO of Frazier Global. I'm joined once again by my partner in crime, Ed Sealover of the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and the editor of the Sum and Substance. Ed, how is it going?
It is great to be back talking business with you, Ryan.
We're taking up some really hot button issues today, Ed. Everything from
fun.
How businesses are affected, from liquor laws and consumer choice to nuclear. And so I can't wait to get into all this with you. Now, the Colorado legislature is considering bills that could significantly impact the alcoholic beverage industry. One bill aims to prevent more grocery stores from obtaining full alcohol licenses. I feel like we talk about this every year, Ed. There's someone trying to restrict alcohol every year. But let's talk about what's happening there. Give us the rundown, Ed, on this bill and the overall environment around restricting alcohol sales.
All right, I want to peel you back 17 years to what is the beginning of what's known as the liquor wars at the Capitol. That was when the Colorado legislature decided to come in 2008 and say, we're going to allow liquor stores to open on Sunday for the first time since Prohibition ended. And they were happy, things went along. Grocery stores, however, lost a substantial amount of Sunday beer sales and said, look, we were the only game in town. How do we make up for this? And so they pushed to be selling more full-strength beer. In 2016, we had what was called the Grand Compromise, and that said grocery stores can sell full-strength beer, and they can also choose to buy out the licenses of 2 nearby liquor stores, and that would allow them to sell beer, wine, and liquor. And we've seen that in about 30 instances across the state. It's not a huge thing because these are expensive propositions. But then in 2022, you had the curveball thrown in there, and that was the grocery stores came back to ballot initiative that said we can sell wine too. So now that passed. Every grocery store can sell beer and wine, every convenience store for that matter too. And liquor stores are taking it on the chin. They first took it on the chin with beer sales. Now they're taking it even more with wine sales, which is often the largest percentage of revenue from a liquor store perspective. They have come back this year and said, do you want to preserve local liquor stores? Well, then we need to pass a bill that says no more grocery stores buying out licenses of liquor stores, no more grocery stores adding spirits. We just want to stop it right where it is, let the liquor stores have what they have, grocery stores have what they have, and move it forward. And of course, that makes no one happy.
I bet. You know, as a consumer, right, I kind of think about how does this affect people, right? The pros and cons. Like, is this anti-competitive? Is this pro-consumer or anti-consumer? What's the perspective that you have on this?
Oh, there's so many angles you can look at from this. From the grocery store angle, they say, look, consumers want convenience. And if you can go in and you can get your breakfast, your dinner, and all the alcohol you need as well, that is convenience. Liquor stores say, hey, look, our folks, many of whom are English as second language speakers. This is a big market, particularly for Ethiopian and Eritrean immigrants. We got into this, we put our life savings into this, knowing we'd play under these rules. And these rules have completely turned over in the last 9 years. And so while you're talking about convenience, we're talking about people losing their livelihoods. And you're also talking about possibly public safety issues. You know, you've got this 18-year-old kid at the counter, and you have to be 21 to kind of check out beer at grocery stores. But are they really going to be watching to make sure that underage kids are not buying things the way that liquor stores are doing it? So you've got a public safety perspective, you've got a consumer convenience perspective, you've got a business integrity perspective, and all of these are coming to a head.
Yeah, I could see it, right? But like, if you're a liquor store owner, especially a small business, right? It's hard out there. It's hard to compete with these larger grocery chains. You don't make as much money. You're not as big. You don't have the budgets for marketing and all these things that they may have. And so I can understand that argument that this allows them a greater ability to stay in business. Although the free market in me says this is a bit protectionist in terms of you're trying to basically protect your turf at the expense of others in terms of consumer choice. That said, that's the debate. That's the conversation, right?
You got it there in a nutshell, Ryan.
That's the breakdown. That's the issue at all.
And nobody's agreeing on it. That's the trick. And the grocery stores continually go back to this. Look, we're not the ones who put wine in grocery stores. We asked the consumers, and they said they wanted it.
Yeah. So here's a question I have for you, and I don't know if you have insights on this, but could this lead to higher prices on everyday folks? Because that's a big issue right now. Everything from tariffs to inflation. We got an environment now where people are just paying more for everything. Could this lead to higher prices for alcohol.
I don't think that this is about the prices here. What it is about the products. Some of the folks who are really worried about this and backing the bill right now are craft brewers and craft distillers who say, look, we have this great entryway to get into local liquor stores. We go down to the local liquor store. We've just opened up. We're 6 months old. We have cans of our beer. They have them try it out, and if they like it, they sell it on their shelves. And that is how we expand a very small market into a bigger market, grow jobs, hire people. You try to pitch this to the folks at Safeway or King Soopers, they're probably not going to listen to a very, very small Colorado brewery. And of course, Safeway and King Soopers say, well, look at our shelves. We've got craft breweries on the shelves. But the truth is, most of those are craft breweries who are larger and who have grown through the current liquor store system. So you've got this push and the pull. Hey, we're going to sell craft beer. Oh, but hey, we can't get big enough to grab your attention unless we can first sell it in the liquor stores, and if the liquor stores close, where are we going to go then?
Colorado has some of the most complex liquor laws that I know, holdovers from Prohibition era and so forth. This will be interesting because I do think you're going to have this ongoing, I call it dust up between the ability to protect small businesses and the ability to give consumers greater choice. That's what it breaks down in my view, and we'll see how this shakes out. Let's keep it moving, Ed. There's a new bill in the Colorado legislature that's raising eyebrows for its approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It proposes to requiring warning labels on products that use gasoline combustion, essentially shaming consumers for their purchases. Ed, is it an appropriate role for government, or is this overstepping boundaries?
I've been covering the legislature long enough where I remember Governor Bill Ritter being elected in 2007, and he really kicked off the push for solar and wind energy in Colorado, and saying at the time, we want an all-of-the-above energy policy. You know what? I understand that maybe you want gas, but there are other people who want wind and solar. Fast forward 17 years, and all of the above is now a phrase that you hear used by oil and gas advocates, whereas you have other folks saying, I'm done with that. It's time to move past oil and gas, and we're going to do it in any way we can. Now, in 2024, the Colorado legislature considered a bill that would have banned new drilling in this state for oil and gas starting in 2030. That was quickly rejected, bipartisan fashion, in a committee. So that idea is now off the table, seemingly. Instead, advocates for pushing away from oil and gas and toward more renewable sources are saying, well, then let's just try to educate folks. You know what? You may still get this gas, but you know what you're doing to the environment when you're doing this? And so they're pushing this kind of first in the country idea of putting labels on things, saying, almost like the labels on a cigarette package where it said, hey, if you smoke this, you're going to die. This is saying, hey, if you buy this, you're going to cause more emissions. The only difference is that there is no upside to cigarettes. You didn't say, hey, if you smoke this, you're going to die, but you'll look cool too. Here you see these labels saying, hey, if you buy this, you're going to increase emissions, but you also may be able to heat the home of someone through the winter in this state.
Now, obviously, the business community is a little concerned over this. Give us a little breakdown, if you will, of the pros and cons, viewpoints that you're hearing from both the business communities and the advocates for this.
Well, the advocates say, look, we need to highlight more what this is doing. The people have for so long gone and pumped gas into their cars that they haven't, or they've gone and they've bought gas for stoves or whatever it is you're buying gas for, and they haven't thought about what it does. This is our way of just saying, hey, you can do this, but we want you to know that as we see polls show more and more people are concerned about global warming, carbon emissions, that this is something that contributes to it. Businesses are saying, wait, what? And how, first of all, how are you picking this out? When are we going to start seeing labels on the cheeseburgers that you get served saying this is going to cause, you to get large and have higher healthcare bills? So you're picking out one industry that they feel like has been picked on for the last 20 years to begin with. They're also saying it's a bit ridiculous that you're trying to cram this onto a label saying, here are the bad things, as I mentioned earlier, without saying, here are the pros, that there are actually benefits of this product, and that's why people are buying it. And the third is just the idea of, is this the role of government? Should government make you feel bad about your purchases? And again, it's everybody makes fun of the term camel's nose under the tent, or slippery slope, or all the things that you can use to take an argument and extrapolate it to the nth degree. But the truth is, if this were to pass, I doubt this is the last time we're going to see this. What else are we going to see?
Well, that's a great point you make. And as a business owner myself, whenever I see new regulations that are being discussed, again, we've had this conversation before, there certainly is a place for sensible regulations, but I also start to think of scope creep, right? While this bill focuses on gasoline-powered products, it's worth noting that other things, whether it be clothing, electronics, animals, especially in agriculture, all have contributions in terms of the production process to emissions. Could we see potential scope creep? Ultimately, where now you got to have warning labels on that pack of beef that you picked up at the local grocery store.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And how far does that scope creep go? And how much? People are saying this is coming from the left side of the aisle. I mean, what if the right side of the aisle shot back at this? Should we put labels on anything that's imported saying your money is going to support overseas corporations, not American corporations? I mean, and at what point did the labels get so big that they overshadow the packaging?
Yeah. I think there's a bigger question I think of when I hear this and I think about this. It's like, is this really solving a problem, right? Is this really solving a pressing challenge for society? And I think that's a part of the problem with any regulations or new laws, is sometimes we pass these things because it sounds good or it feels good, but is it actually making a difference in people's lives? Is putting labels on gasoline-powered products really going to solve for reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Or are there alternatives, ways to do that? And I don't know, maybe the business community is suggesting some alternatives to this. What's the discussion around that?
The long-time discussion in the business community around reducing greenhouse gas emissions is we're all in for it. In fact, if you will look at anybody from petroleum companies to manufacturers, they're all working to cut their emissions as it is. But the state too often puts rules that are unrealistic in scope and time frame and cost in there, and that literally could lead to shutting down jobs. We're seeing this 3 or 4 times a year with regulations coming out of the Air Quality Control Commission. The idea is that, okay, we'll work on this, we'll bring down emissions, but stop moving the goalposts, stop throwing new rules at us. And here's one more it's interesting because it's not a rule that's designed to make it very hard to change and to adapt to. This is not, you've got to cut 20% out of your smokestacks in the next 5 years. This is, hey, we're going to make sure that your customers feel bad about what they're buying. And that's a whole new area that maybe we should be talking about other ways to cut emissions.
Well, speaking of cutting emissions and energy and the ability to create more energy capacity, nuclear is back again here in Colorado, but this time there's some bipartisan support for actually bringing some nuclear solutions to the table. Ed, give us the rundown on that.
Yes, for the past 2 years, Larry Lisson, a Republican state senator from Colorado Springs, has seemed to wage this quixotic battle where he's wanted to change the definition of clean energy in the state to add nuclear energy to it. That would do 2 primary things. It would open up nuclear folks who would be doing nuclear projects to some funding that's only available to clean energy sources right now, and it would allow utilities who benefit from nuclear energy to include that in the portfolio, the mandatory minimum percentage of clean energy that they have to use. It would not bring any products into the state. It would not actually put any state money to it. And for 2 years in a row, it had died in its first committee, and everybody kept brushing it off. All of a sudden, over the interim, Liston worked really hard to get bipartisan backing on this. And you're seeing folks who are not just moderate Democrats, but who are environmental Democrats, such as Alex Valdez, the state representative from Denver, who is the primary co-sponsor in the House, who says, guess what? I have looked into this, and I don't think we can meet our emissions reduction goals without this. You can only go so far with wind and solar. You need some other things to take you there. And so you're seeing this coalescence of some Democrats, some environmentalists, around this idea that, yes, we need to consider nuclear energy clean because that's the only way we're getting to these goals. But I know your next question is probably be, wait, is it really clean?
Well, I mean, is it, right? I mean, obviously, there's been discussion about nuclear's potential role in terms of expanding that as a energy source here in the U.S. around the country. I know for some, though, to be quite frank, it still conjures up images of Chernobyl and the situation, the disaster in Japan. But obviously nuclear is fairly safe. I think the data would show that these things, when done appropriately, are very safe and have tremendous power, or not just literally, but the power to really grow the energy capacity here in Colorado and around the country. And it is clean. You are reducing emissions, but what would you add on to that?
Well, the opponents of this idea, who are also environmentalists, and I would say it's probably a larger portion of the environmental community that's opposing this, they're saying, yeah, you know what, maybe it doesn't put out emissions, but do you know what it does put out? It puts out radioactive spent fuel that will take thousands, if not tens of thousands of years to not be a danger to our society. So here you are producing emissions-free energy, but then trying to figure out how to store this. Are you going to put it on trains to get it out of the state to store it? Are you going to store it somewhere here in Colorado? What does that do to the surrounding community? And they're saying we need to rethink the definition of clean, not just about what comes out, but what goes into this as well. So that's where you're seeing the big pushback. I got to tell you, though, the pushback isn't working right now. It has gotten out of the House with bipartisan support. It cleared its first Senate committee with bipartisan support. One of the groups that is very traditionally Democratic, who is coming out in big favor of this, is the labor movement. They're saying, look, we need to do this. There are so many coal-fired plants, particularly in the Pueblo community, a lot of folks point to, that are going to be shutting down by 2031, and we're going to be losing a lot of good-paying jobs for people who live there. You can't put up solar panels to replicate those jobs. They don't pay anywhere near as much. But a nuclear reactor, especially a small modular reactor, which is what is in study and is probably going to start rolling out in this country in about 10 more years, is a way that you could get a lot of people working both to build it and to operate it and replace these jobs on a long-term basis. So it's an emissions issue. It's a job issue. It's an interesting issue that's taken on new dimensions it had not taken on in the past.
So for the viewers who may not be familiar with nuclear or this whole conversation about what needs to happen with energy in general, I want to go back to what you said. Nuclear has the potential, has ups and downside to it, but it has the potential to not only be a way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, to creating more jobs in terms of the construction of these facilities, and overall expanding the energy capacity for Colorado and the nation.
That is exactly the arguments for this, and people will then add this caveat. By the way, look at a country like France, which gets almost all of its energy from nuclear energy. I mean, people, you mentioned Chernobyl, you mentioned Fukushima. People even think back to 3 Mile Island, though nobody was killed in the 3 Mile Island incident, and say, well, this is going to endanger our lives. And in fact, you hear opponents say, well, these are just going to be great targets for terrorists to bomb and fry our communities, much like happened to the area around Chernobyl. But there are some pretty serious arguments that people from both sides are saying, I think we need nuclear now, just as we are looking at sources like geothermal, carbon capture and sequestration, things we weren't looking at 5 years ago to expand the renewable energy portfolio because solar and wind can't do it all. Nuclear is very serious in that conversation now, and I think it's only going to pick up in the coming years.
And one last piece of that is, I think folks have to realize, in addition to the job potential, there is the idea that small businesses who support the development and construction of these facilities could see some pickup in business as well in terms of those additional services and equipment and materials that go into doing this type of work. So, well, Ed, that's all the time we have today, from booze bills to government shaming to the prospect of nuclear actually being put on the table in a bipartisan form. We've covered a lot of ground today. So be sure to catch the Business Buzz each week for more insightful discussions that impact you and our economy. For the 9 News Business Buzz, my partner Ed Sealover, I'm Ryan Frazier. Until next time.